Before we dive into this breathtaking story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is crucial for us to keep bringing dark and mysterious narratives. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single story. Now, let's get started. I always knew there was something off about Ravenswood. It wasn't just the mountains that seemed to whisper at dusk, or the way silence blanketed the town after sunset. It was the crossroads. That patch of dirt in the middle of nowhere, where 4 roads intersected, carried a different kind of energy. Since I was a kid, I'd heard the stories. My grandmother used to say that under the light of the full moon, something or someone waited for anyone brave enough to show up. I remember the first time I heard the name Elias Cartwright. It was a stormy night, and my dad was telling the story around the fireplace. Elias was just a regular farmer until the day his herd vanished. They say he went to the crossroads, desperate, and made a request. When the cattle returned, fat and healthy, it seemed like Elias had outsmarted fate. But it was only a matter of time. He died days later with no explanation. His body was found in the exact spot where they say he struck the deal. The stories kept coming over the years. Desperate people, looking to solve impossible problems, always found some excuse to go there. Wealth, love, revenge. The motivations varied, but the outcome was always the same. Anyone who made a request paid a steep price. No one knew how, but the crossroads collected its debts in cruel and unexpected ways. And despite the fear the legend brought, some said it was all just a coincidence. Me? I've never believed in coincidences. I wasn't the only one who'd heard these stories, of course. In town, everyone knew someone who had tried their luck at the crossroads, but no one talked about it openly. It was a shared secret, a kind of taboo everyone pretended to ignore. Still, rumors spread. Some said it was just superstition, but others swore they'd seen the results with their own eyes. Take the case of Mrs. Hargrove, for example. She was an old, bitter woman, always complaining about her hard life. That was, until the day she started winning the local lottery, week after week. People whispered that she'd made a deal. And, like all the others, the price came soon enough. One day, she simply vanished. Some say she ran away from town, but I know the truth. Anyone who makes a pact with whatever lives at the crossroads can't run forever. Then there was Caleb, the blacksmith. He was in love with a woman who never gave him the time of day. So, on a cold night, Caleb went to the crossroads with a black candle and something only he knew about. 2 weeks later, the woman married him. It was like magic, but it didn't last. Caleb started hearing voices, losing his mind. When they found him, he was muttering nonsense, his eyes glazed over, sitting right in the middle of the crossroads. As for his wife, no one knows what happened to her. These stories piled up. Each new generation had its own accounts, but one thing never changed. The favors always came with a price, and no one could escape the debt. Even so, people kept going. Some said it was hope, others, desperation. But to me, it seemed like a game where the devil always won. The first ones to strike deals at the crossroads thought they had outsmarted fate. It was easy to believe. Life seemed to turn around overnight. Businesses thrived, illnesses vanished, enemies fell. But it didn't take long for the price to be collected. It wasn't just bad luck or tragedy. It was deliberate, cruel, almost theatrical. I remember a man named Edgar. He had lost everything in a fire and went to the crossroads, desperate for a fresh start. Within days, his home was rebuilt, bigger and grander than before. He became the most prosperous man in town. But weeks later, strange things began happening. The animals on his farm grew sick. His children started having nightmares, waking up with screams that echoed through the neighborhood. When Edgar was found dead, his eyes were wide open, staring into nothing, as if he had seen something no one else could imagine. Then there was Ruth, a young seamstress. She wished for skill, wanting her dresses to be the most sought after in the region. And she got her wish. People traveled from other towns just to commission her work. Ruth grew wealthy, but she started complaining of pain in her hands. Over time, her fingers became twisted, impossibly deformed. In the end, she couldn't even hold a needle. The fortune she earned wasn't enough to buy a moment of peace. These stories spread like wildfire, yet no one dared confront what was really happening. When the price was collected, it always struck at the heart of what the person cherished most. No matter how hard they tried to escape, the debts were always paid. Deep down, everyone knew the demon of the crossroads never forgot. It didn't take long for the town to start changing. It wasn't something you'd notice right away, but a feeling that crept in, thick and suffocating like fog. The people who had made pacts began acting strangely, as if they carried an invisible weight no one else could understand. It was as if the shadow of the crossroads followed them, even when they were far from it. I remember Martha, the sweet owner of the bakery. She was always a beloved figure, known for her cakes and warm smile. Her pastries became even more perfect, and her shop started drawing people from all over. But Martha changed. She grew paranoid, constantly looking over her shoulder, as if expecting to see something lurking nearby. One day, while the bakery was full, she suddenly dropped to her knees and started screaming. No one understood her words, but the terror in her eyes was unmistakable. Days later, she was found dead. The bakery is still there, shuttered, with cakes rotting in the display cases. It wasn't just Martha. Others began reporting strange occurrences. Sounds from nowhere, shadows moving where there shouldn't be anything. It felt as though the very air in the town had shifted. You could feel it when you walked the streets, that heaviness in your chest, the creeping sense that you were being watched. Some began to say it wasn't just the demon collecting on its deals. It was toying with the lives it held in its grasp. The most frightening part was how it seemed to spread. Even those who hadn't made any deals began to feel its effects. Children cried at night, claiming something was in the shadows. The elderly started locking their doors well before dark. It was as if the entire town was being consumed, piece by piece, and no one knew who would be next. As the shadow of the crossroads spread through the town, despair took hold. It was as if everyone knew something was wrong, yet no one could resist the temptation of an easy solution to their problems. Pacts, once rare and made in secrecy, were now happening with alarming frequency. More and more people appeared at the crossroads, carrying candles, offerings, and their deepest desires. I remember seeing George the blacksmith hauling an old chest down the road. He had always been a strong and proud man, but that day, his shoulders seemed weighed down by something intangible. They say he asked for health, fearing he wouldn't be able to provide for his family. The following week, George looked like a new man, more vigorous than ever, but his joy was short-lived. Days later, his wife began to wither away, as if the life was being drained from her. He got what he asked for, but lost what he loved most. This wasn't an isolated story. With each new pact, something shifted in the town. People's gazes grew more distrustful, and they started avoiding one another. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that anyone could be the next to pay the price. What scared me the most was how the crossroads seemed alive, calling out to people. Those who passed by swore they heard whispers, promises of wealth, power, or eternal love. The allure was irresistible, but the cost was undeniable. The crossroads wasn't just a place. It was a force, feeding on the desperation of a town spiraling into chaos. Everything changed when it happened to Henry. He was the town's pharmacist, a respected and cheerful man, always ready to help anyone in need. No one would have guessed that Henry, a pillar of the community, would make a pact, but he did. They say he asked for something simple, a cure for the illness that was consuming his daughter, and he got it. Within days, the girl was healthy, running through the streets as if nothing had ever been wrong. For the first time in years, Henry seemed truly happy. But the happiness didn't last. It started with small incidents. A bottle of medicine he swore he had put away would appear somewhere else. Strange noises in the night. A shadow he caught in the corner of his eye, always gone when he looked directly. Then came the voice. At first, it was just a whisper, something he thought was exhaustion playing tricks on him. But soon it grew clearer, more insistent. "You owe me, Henry." That night he returned to the crossroads, desperate to undo the pact. The entire town woke up to his screams. When they found him, he was kneeling in the middle of the crossroads, muttering incoherently, tears streaming down his face. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were dull, as if the light had been snuffed out. He tried to speak, but the only words he managed were, "He'll never stop. He'll never give back what's mine." Henry wasn't the first to pay the price, but he was the clearest warning. After him, it became undeniable that the soul of anyone who made a pact wasn't just a currency. It was a trophy. Something the demon kept as a reminder of its victory. Some tried to avoid the crossroads after that, but for many, fear had already become part of daily life. The shadow loomed, and the whispers never stopped. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like this video. Your support helps the channel grow and brings more stories like this straight to you. It's just one click, but it makes all the difference. After Henry, things grew even darker. It was no longer enough for the demon to claim the souls of those who made pacts. It seemed determined to make a point. Each collection became more cruel, more theatrical, as if to show the town that no one could escape its grasp. It wasn't just souls the demon took. It stripped away dignity, sanity, and everything people held most dear. I remember Abigail, the teacher. Everyone knew her as the kindest woman in town, someone who dedicated her life to teaching and caring for the children. One day, without warning, she went to the crossroads. No one knows what she asked for, but when she returned, she seemed like a different person. Her smile was still there, but it was empty, like she was wearing a mask. Then the unthinkable began to happen. Children started disappearing one by one, and Abigail claimed she knew nothing. When the truth came out, far too late, it was horrifying. She had made a pact to preserve her youth, and the children were being used as offerings to delay her payment. The demon wasn't satisfied with collecting debts. It wanted the entire town to witness the consequences. Each new story was more horrifying than the last, and the townspeople began to realize it wasn't just about avoiding deals. The very presence of the crossroads was poisoning everything and everyone. The demon's wrath was relentless, and the town could no longer pretend it was just superstition. It was real, it was cruel, and it was closing in. One quiet night, when even the wind seemed to avoid passing through Ravenswood, a stranger arrived in town. He wasn't an ordinary traveler. He wore a long black coat, weathered with age, and carried a cane with a raven's head carved into its handle. His eyes were unsettling, cold and calculating, as if they could see something beyond what the rest of us could comprehend. He headed straight for the tavern, where the few brave enough to venture out at night had gathered. He took a seat at the bar, ordered a glass of whiskey, and acted like he belonged there. It didn't take long for word to spread. He knew about the crossroads. Not only that, but he claimed to know the demon. Some dismissed it as drunken rambling, but others, like me, couldn't ignore the tension in his voice or the sinister gleam in his eyes as he spoke. That same night, he started asking questions. He wanted to know who had made pacts, what kinds of wishes had been granted, and, most intriguingly, how the demon collected its debts. But instead of fear or desperation, he seemed intrigued, as though piecing together a macabre puzzle. Then he said something that made the entire room freeze. "Every pact can be broken, but you need the courage to face the cost." No one understood what he meant, and he didn't explain. He simply left his empty glass on the bar, walked out the door, and headed toward the crossroads. I don't know what he was looking for, but that night something shifted. The crossroads, which had always felt still and ominous, seemed to pulse like a dark heart, feeding on every step he took in its direction. His arrival left a mark, and his cryptic words lingered in our minds. Whether he was a savior or a harbinger of more chaos, none of us could say. But Ravenswood would never be the same. The stranger's presence unsettled the town in ways no one had anticipated. His words lingered in everyone's minds. Every pact can be broken. For some, it sounded like hope. For others, a reckless challenge. But the idea that the demon could be defeated ignited something among the townsfolk. Slowly, a small group formed, bringing together those who had lost everything to the crossroads and had nothing left to fear. I was there when the plan began to take shape. The group included people like George, who had lost his wife, and Lydia, who had traded her soul for fame and was now haunted by voices echoing in her mind. The stranger seemed to know more than he let on. He sketched symbols on the ground, spoke of ancient rituals, and revealed that breaking the cycle required something no one wanted to hear: a sacrifice. Not just any sacrifice, someone willing to face the demon directly. As we planned, fear began to creep in. The sensation of being watched was undeniable. Some townspeople started disappearing without a trace. Others reported seeing shadows lurking at their windows late at night. That's when we realized someone in the group had betrayed us, feeding information to the demon. The tension reached its peak on a dark, moonless night, when one of our members was found dead at the crossroads, deep, claw-like marks across their chest, as if their soul had been ripped out. The stranger, however, seemed unfazed. It was expected, he said with a calmness that chilled us to the bone. He had known the demon would play dirty. At that moment, it became clear. If we wanted to win, we'd have to be even more ruthless. The demon wasn't just testing our resolve. It was reminding us that the cost of rebellion was steep. And yet, for the first time, we felt something other than despair, a sliver of determination. But could we trust each other enough to survive? When the night of the ritual arrived, the town felt dead. The streets were empty, windows shut tight, curtains drawn. The only light came from the torches we carried as we marched toward the crossroads. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though something unseen was trying to hold us back. The stranger led the way, his black coat swaying with the icy wind. In his hands he carried an ancient book, its cover marked with symbols no one dared to try deciphering. The circle was drawn with precision at the heart of the crossroads: coarse salt, ash, and what the stranger called ancient blood. As the symbols took shape, the sounds began. They weren't ordinary noises: footsteps with no source, distant laughter, and the occasional whisper that seemed to come from inside our own heads. The demon's presence was unmistakable, surrounding us, watching us. The final step was the sacrifice. It wasn't decided until that moment who it would be. Then Lydia stepped forward. Her eyes, once filled with terror, were now resolute. "I made the pact. This is my debt," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. No one argued. The stranger began the chant, and the crossroads itself seemed to pulse as if it were alive. As the ritual progressed, the ground beneath us began to crack. The air reeked of sulfur, and the demon appeared. Not fully visible, but horrifyingly perceptible, like a nightmare given form. Looking at it was like staring into something beyond comprehension. Its voice was deep and cutting, reverberating in our minds. "You think you can challenge me?" It laughed, the sound like blades scraping against each other. Lydia stepped into the circle, locking eyes with the creature, unflinching. "I break the cycle with my life," she declared, as the stranger uttered the final words of the ritual. A brilliant light erupted at the center of the crossroads, and the demon roared in fury, its form unraveling like smoke in the wind. But as the light faded, what should have been relief was replaced by a chilling emptiness. The air was colder, heavier. Something was wrong. The crossroads hadn't been silenced. It was waiting. And deep down, I knew the price we paid wasn't enough. When the blinding light finally faded, Lydia was gone. She had vanished along with the demon, but the crossroads still pulsed, radiating an energy none of us could explain. The circle etched into the ground was shattered, as if torn apart by something beyond natural forces. Everything felt too still, like the eerie calm before a storm. The stranger, who had remained steady throughout, now seemed different. He approached the center of the crossroads, knelt, and ran his fingers over the marks left behind. "It's not over," he muttered, almost to himself. His words hit us like a punch to the gut. We thought we had won, that Lydia's sacrifice had been enough. But it wasn't. That very night, the real cost of the ritual began to reveal itself. Lydia wasn't the only one who had disappeared. Each person involved in the pact felt something was wrong. George, the blacksmith, woke up with dark marks spreading up his arm like infected roots. Martha, who had stayed home, began screaming as blood poured from her eyes, begging for relief from something no one else could see. It was as if, even in defeat, the demon had left a part of itself behind to torment us. The town, already teetering on the edge, descended into complete chaos. No one trusted anyone anymore. Some whispered that the demon was still here, feeding on our fear. Others believed we had awakened something even worse. All I knew was that the weight in my chest wouldn't lift. No matter what we did, the feeling of being watched remained. The stranger left before dawn, offering no explanations. He placed the book at the center of the crossroads and simply said, "You know where to find me, if you survive that long." Then he disappeared into the darkness, leaving us alone with a crossroads that never stopped pulsing, waiting for its next victim. The demon was gone, but its shadow lingered, reminding us that some victories come with a cost too steep to bear. The days that followed were pure despair. Ravenswood was no longer a town. It was an empty shell, scarred by the darkness the crossroads had left behind. Homes were abandoned. Deserted streets became a reflection of the fear everyone felt. Those who remained were unrecognizable, shadows of their former selves, consumed by a terror they couldn't name. Those who tried to leave found that the town wouldn't let them go. The roads stretched endlessly, always looping back to the crossroads. It was as if Ravenswood itself was cursed, trapped in an unbreakable cycle. Many gave up, locking themselves inside their homes, waiting for something they couldn't even explain. The rare moments anyone passed by the crossroads, they were overwhelmed by an absolute sense of dread. The book left by the stranger still sat there, untouched, but no one dared approach it. At night, faint lights could be seen flickering in the center of the intersection, and whispers echoed through the air, carrying promises no one wanted to hear. I knew the town was doomed. The memories of those I had lost and the horrors I had witnessed consumed me. But the worst part was knowing the crossroads wasn't finished. It was waiting, as patient as ever, for its next victim, for more souls to add to its collection. Ravenswood wasn't just a ghost town. It was a warning, a place where time had stopped and where shadows continued to dance. A grim reminder that no one escapes a pact with the demon. No matter how much time passes, it always comes back to collect. I knew I shouldn't go back to the crossroads. Every fiber of my being screamed to stay away, but something pulled me there. Maybe it was the weight of the stories I'd lived through, the guilt of surviving while so many others had been taken. Or maybe it was the crossroads itself, its invisible presence whispering promises my desperate heart wanted to believe. That night, the sky was pitch black, not a single star in sight. The crossroads felt different, as if it had been waiting for me. The book was still there, covered in dust and shadows. As I knelt before it, a deep, cold laugh sliced through the silence. The demon had never left. It had been there all along, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. "You've returned," it said, its voice echoing like the sound of bones snapping. "But what do you have to offer? Everyone else has already paid." There was no escape. I knew this was the end. But instead of running, I faced the darkness. "I offer my soul, but you leave this town forever." The demon laughed, a sound that tore through reality itself. "You think it's that simple?" it asked. "I don't just want your soul. I want you, a new guardian for this crossroads, a replacement for me." Its words froze me in place. That was its plan all along. It wasn't just collecting souls. It was recruiting someone to continue its work. I hesitated, but deep down, I knew I had no choice. To save what was left of Ravenswood, I agreed. The last thing I remember before the darkness consumed me was the demon's satisfied laugh and the sound of the wind carrying my name. Now, I am what it was, the new demon of the crossroads. I hear the footsteps of those who approach, the whispers of forbidden desires. I see their faces filled with desperation and greed, and I feel the cycle beginning again. The crossroads never rests, and neither do I. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement is key to helping the channel grow and bringing you more terrifying stories like this one. Subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and stay tuned for the next tales that will spark your imagination. And maybe your nightmares. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.